Hello, welcome back to the podcast. I am excited for our guest today, Cristina Olivares, because we need to have more conversations about why Latinas need to be more visible, especially as we are starting a whole new year. But before we get there, I want to open the door for Cristina to introduce herself and share a little bit about herself and everything that you're doing because I see you and I'm like, I just love what you're doing, and that's really one of the reasons why you're here. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be a part of this podcast. I'm Cristina Olivares. I am a four-time award-winning visibility and business coach, TEDx speaker, and the host of Hustle and Socialize conference. I am originally from the Rio Grande Valley in deep South Texas on the US Mexico border. All my life, I grew up there, and it just really made me feel so empowered to be a Latina and to be a Texan, like a Tejana. I wanted, all my life, I grew up as an only child. And so I would have to use my imagination to play and to get creative, which around the time of when I was a child, I really took an interest and a passion for two main things, which was broadcast journalism and the internet. Around that time, AOL was coming into what we now know as like social media. That was the first social media platform I ever had. And I really had this love for television and wanting to be visible and wanting to be on stage. And so when I went to college at Texas State University, I knew it. I was like, I'm ready. I'm going to do everything that they tell you to do. I'm going to take all the internships. And then when I graduated college, I struggled so much to find a job. Every time I would interview at different TV stations, they would often tell me that I needed to cut my hair or I needed to look a certain way or sound a certain way. And I just couldn't find that intro to actually kickstart my career. And I always felt like I wasn't enough. They make you in television, they make you be a certain way. And I could tell that people were starting to put me in a box, if you will. And I kept trying and trying and trying, and nothing was happening. And around that time, that's when I started recognizing that businesses were utilizing Facebook and Instagram and Twitter to start marketing their what they do and everything that their business is all about. So I started a blog called The Social Butterfly Gal, and that was my persona. And I was documenting everything that I was doing in public relations and just being a social media manager. And within, I want to say, like a year and a half after I started that blog, I ended up turning it into an LLC and started my own company. And it's about to be 10 years being in business. And so I have learned so much and also have really taken a notion of what visibility means and what does that look like for myself and my clients as well.
Yeah, and I love hearing your story because sounds to me like you were like, okay, I've done everything that society has told me to do. I went to college, I got the education, but now when the door wasn't opening for you, you said, well, I'm going to open the door. And if I don't get a seat at the table, I'm going to create my own table, which a lot of people, I want to say, struggle with that, Christina. Like, even the thought of being visible for a lot of Latinas is like how scary. And the way I personally see that people are afraid of visibility is because they know they have the LLC, they know they have the great offer, but then they don't have like a profile picture on their social media because que va a decir mi empleador, right? And
Yeah.
also two is like I think that we are afraid of showing up authentically because we oftentimes have been told what you just shared with us that we need to look a certain way, that maybe we don't can't have an accent, can be brown, black, or red, or all of these colors that make us who we are. And so I want to talk about that because you had the little fire in the belly, I'm gonna call it, where you're like, no, I'm gonna be visible and I want to be visible. Why was it so important for you to feel seen and be invisible?
I remember walking into different networking events in San Antonio. So I live in San Antonio, Texas now, and a lot of the business that I was doing in the first couple of years of my company was very localized. And I established a really good presence locally before I ended up, market online and going national. But when I was going to a lot of these networking events, even though San Antonio is predominantly Hispanic, there still wasn't representation. And it really frustrated me. And I remember, I was 24 when I started my business. So I was young and very inexperienced, if you will. But every time I was walking into these places, I noticed, like, hey, where are all the other people who look like me? And I started to feel very just uncomfortable. And I think that uncomfortability made me realize that things need to change, and no one else is going to be the person that's going to change unless it's us. And so at that moment, I was taking note, and at that moment, that's when I really realized that we need to change something. Because at the end of the day, we know that visibility leads to more business, which then leads to more impact and more money. And the same people in the same circles are the ones that are making more money, but not our own communities. And I think that's was the switch, was like, oh, my visibility is so important because of the fact that if more people see people who look like ourselves, it's going to cause them to have that own fire in themselves and then want to get out there and make more money. And that's where I ended up launching Hustle and Socialize, my second business, after going to all of these places locally and saying, I'm fed up and we need to change something, especially in these business circles.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now you said something that I can totally resonate with, because sometimes, especially as Latinas, when we are developing business ideas, sometimes we think that, oh my God, like, I think that I'm just gonna go back to school. A lot of women feel that way. Like, it's so hard. I'm gonna go back to school because my business is, it's not even a possibility. And you talk about impact. And just recently, before I invited you to come and join me here on the show, I saw a post that you made about how we need to really align our values to the way we develop this visibility strategy. Why is it so important for women of color right now to be strategic with their values, but also the impact that they want to create in their business?
When we think about people that are aligning with us, we want to be sure that they have our community's best interests at hand. And I know at times it seems very difficult in a world that is so pushy on instant gratification and virality. But when we think about who is taking the seat at the table and who's making those decisions, it does have to come for people who really value the work that we do. And I know that when it comes to whether it's sponsorships, clients, brand partnerships, we want to be sure that we're aligning each other with people who really do value and want to see other women of color and other Latinas really take that notion, because it does create impact. Being able to get these partnerships, it changes things, right? For the very first time in Hustle and Socialize's journey, being able to have a presenting sponsor and have actual investment allowed me to hire other Latinas to work with me on the conference. And then I was able to funnel my own money and the hard work that I've done to them, which then makes a ripple effect. It allows everyone to kind of rise and grow. And that's really important, because the more that we can continue to partner and align with other people who believe in the work that we're doing, we're able to then give the money back to our own communities. And now we're creating that economic impact where now almost every other Latina can rise up and take control of their wealth, their legacy, the impact that they're making. And so I think it's incredibly important to look to see who is aligned with that, and to also be very unapologetic about it. I step into a lot of rooms where I know that they might be financial institutions and they have a certain way, but if you're going to align with me, you got to align with me at my 100% authenticness. And that's something that I think I've really taken to heart as I continue to grow.
And I love that so much for you. I'm like, I just love seeing that. Now, I want to ask you because obviously, so I met Christina at a conference 2 years ago now, I want to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I loved about meeting you is the energy. Like, I consider myself like a high energy individual, but when I saw you at Mujeron event and you were getting ready to go on stage and they're introducing you, you were just like on fire. Like, your energy is so high, which I love that because you really embody what you're sharing with us, like just being unapologetically you, and whoever's gonna like you is gonna like you, and whoever is not gonna like you, it's their loss, right?
Yeah.
But what role has mindset play in your journey as an entrepreneur and as a visibility coach? Because I want to know like the behind the scenes, like the raw things that we often don't talk about. What kind of mindset work have you done to be here with me today?
I have been very privileged and fortunate to seek out therapy. And when I think the very first time I actually had a therapist was when I was 19 years old and I had just left to go to college. And I was culture shock at my university because I was born and raised down on the border. And here I am going into another place where there were people who didn't look like me. And I really was freaked out. And so I really credit a lot of the work and the healing work that I've done to my just working in therapy for the last, over the last decade and more decades, right? I think having a person, a third party, and really taking a huge investment on your mind is super important, and the healing aspects, because entrepreneurship really reveals so many things about you that you never knew before. So I credit first therapy, but I also have made, investments in myself in the form of health and wellness and in the form of working with other coaches in masterminds. I really believe in having a solid routine when it comes to your mental health. And so for me, it's really important to get outdoors as best as I can. It's really hot in Texas, but take the time to go for a walk, take time to run, take time to exercise and to eat properly, and then make those key investments in working with other people. But I feel like it's such a journey. I think I've learned, especially this last year and a half, I experienced a really big challenge after my husband got laid off from his very, very stable job that we thought, he was climbing up the ladder. And when he unexpectedly got laid off, everything now turned to my business to survive. And at the same time, you're building and you're growing, but at you also have to make sure that you have food on the table and rent is being paid and everything else, and it has really affected my mindset. But I know that at the end of the day, I built a solid foundation throughout the last decade, and I cling to that, and I am making sure that I'm taking the time to focus on gratitude. Something my therapist always tells me is like, always look for the small wins and the gratitude part of it. But I really feel like that has been such key components to me being an entrepreneur, because we can't do these things alone. We have to have community, but we also have to really work on ourselves, because the more we work on ourselves, the better we can make the impact for others, because it's like we're filling our cup.
Yeah. And right now you mentioned your husband and how he was laid off. And a lot of people will default to, well, now we don't have the income. Now it's time for us to cut expenses or to just even pause investing in ourselves. Why was it so important for you to continue to do that though? Because you did have the option of saying, like, okay, I'm not going to be part of any masterminds, or I'm not going to be part of any coaching,
Yeah.
because that's what we do, right? But like, why did Christina decided to continue to invest in coaching and masterminds?
Needed to be with other people who could continue to push me in ways that I didn't know I needed. And I really made it a commitment to myself that the more I invest in me, the more I'm going to see the results. And so, for that, I really was for the last year and a half, I was still taking a part of masterminds. I did take a pause after this last round because I really felt like it was time for me to integrate everything that I needed to, that I learned, right? And so even though I was integrating well, it's like sometimes you just have to take a step back and be like, hey, I've worked on myself for a solid 2 years. Now let's see what I can do. And then if I need to keep investing, I'll keep investing. But I knew that I couldn't do this alone. And also, my husband, while he is an incredible support system and a partner for life, at the end of the day, we need community. And sometimes you have to make that separation of leaning on your partner or your support and actually working and being around a support system that is a third party that doesn't understand what you're going through, right? And I think that that was really, really crucial to what I needed to do in that year.
Yeah, and I love seeing that. And having a partner that supports your journey as an entrepreneur is important. But yeah, you're saying it so well. Half of the time they really don't understand what we're doing. They're
Yeah,
just like, "Yes, honey, you can do it." But then they're like, "Wait, you're doing what? Where are we going?" So it's
yeah.
always nice to have the third party that it's really just like there for us to hold space. Now,
Hmm.
as a visibility coach, is that what landed you the TEDx speaking, or tell us about that? Because I haven't heard this story and I'm so curious to know, like, was it because of visibility that you ended up there, or was it the TEDx that then converted into visibility?
Yeah. So in the first 5 years of my company, because I got it in 2020, I had built a solid foundation. And mind you, this was before I really kind of exploded, as I like to call, like this was still in my formative business years. And because I had built a solid foundation with really being visible, I mean, my content was pretty much doing the heavy lifting. I received an email. So I didn't apply for the TEDx talk. I was just minding my own business. In 2020, we were all trying to, keep afloat. And I received an email. And at first, I thought that they wanted for me to be a coach because I was like, of course, like, why would they, they're reaching out because I have all this experience and they want me to be a coach. And then they said, no, we want you to give a TEDx talk. And at first, I turned it down because I had major imposter syndrome. And a month prior, I was watching all these TEDx talks and I saw one of my colleagues from college. I watched her TEDx talk, and I mean, she was incredible. And you could tell she was meant for that stage. And so when they approached me about it, I originally said, like, no, thank you so much. And they kept telling me, no, Christina, we want you to give this talk. And so the topic that I gave, the idea that I gave was called Reimagining the Way We Use Social Media. And the idea presented was we had just experienced 2020 and we just experienced a way of now social media is no longer optional. Now, at that point, we needed it. And as business owners, we needed it even more. And so I talked about the process of social media and how it's not just for the vanity metrics and going viral and everything, but now we're utilizing it to build trust. We're utilizing it to build community. And we need to really reimagine what social media looks like in a post pandemic world. And so I gave that talk to an audience of 6 people because at that time it was the pandemic and we were still in isolation. There was no audience. And let me tell you, that is even harder to do because usually as speakers, we play to the crowd. And you said it, I have so much energy. Well, when you are now only in a room of 6 people, your energy level has to rise even more because you have to bring the energy where no one is in the room. So in the room, it was my speaker coach, the 2 camera guys, the security guard, the other speaker coach, and my husband. And that was it. And honestly, that experience propelled me forward, because right after that happened, I ended up, so I was working, my business was mostly social media management before I shifted into coaching. And I had always been a speaker. Speaking has always been like the thing that I did as I was managing social media. But after that TEDx talk, I left social media management. I got rid of that offer and I started to transition into coaching. And then about a year after that, I took over my second company 100%. And that's when everything just kind of like fell into place. And so it was such a surreal experience. And I'm forever grateful that even though I had major imposter syndrome, I still did it and I still got to, be on that dot and be visible, because it really has changed my life, and it's changed my journey as a speaker.
And it's changing the lives of everyone that has worked with you, and also is creating a ripple effect in our community. And I just love the concept of being visible, because it's important for the greater impact. And sometimes we, especially as Latinas or women of color, we default back to like, well, I'm just going to volunteer extra hours to create impact, versus seeing us as the brand. And you just mentioned content, right? So we're going to talk about that. So oftentimes when people are thinking about being visible or developing their personal brand or their business brand, content creation is something that a lot of people struggle with, because they're like, well, what do I say? How do
Mhm.
I say it? When do I say it? So can you give us maybe some tips on how you do it? How do you plan your content? How do you just show up unapologetically?
Yeah, I love this. I feel that I would always push myself out of my comfort zone to film publicly. So, in the early days of my business, I would go to coffee shops, and it is kind of loud, but I would wear my headphones and I would challenge myself to go live in the middle of like being at the coffee shop, because I wanted to get comfortable with other people watching me. And that was kind of like one thing that I would do. But a lot of the work that I do with building content is understanding the needs of my audience. And so the first thing that I would say to anybody who is wanting to start creating video content is to start doing research on your audience and what challenges they might be facing, and how you can sort of fill in those gaps of creating content that addresses those challenges, but also building connection. Connection is super key to everything. And so I usually take a lot of data from anything that like my audience writes, whether it is a comment on one of my videos, or if they fill out a survey, or even the inquiry forms of people who want to work with me. So I start building that library, if you will, and I start recognizing like the patterns and the gaps of what people want to talk, what do they want from me, right? I will say that being visible also is allowing yourself to be very vulnerable in the way that you show up. And there is this notion of, okay, well, now that I'm going to create content, now I feel like I have to be super, super vulnerable and share, like overshare. And one thing that I teach my clients is like, you get to decide what you want to share, but at the same time, you get to decide how you want to share it. And so if you're not ready to share a very difficult situation in your life, it is completely okay. You want to make sure that you're showing up with power versus the victim. And so I always make sure that whenever I'm sharing something super vulnerable, it is coming from a place of power and not coming from a place of like, well, look at me, I'm playing victim. And, like I want everybody to feel sorry for me. It's like, these are the lessons that I've learned, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. But I feel like my process has changed a lot. I mean, I batch my content a lot so that I'm not focused on creating content every day, because I don't have the time or the energy to create every day. So usually, like today's Monday, I normally plan out my content for the whole week and see what content do I need to actually shoot that I'm on camera, and where can I use B-roll or graphics to kind of fall into that place. But it's really allowing me to have that time, that freedom, and that flexibility, so that I have a library of content And I'm also showing up in the best way that I can for myself.
Yeah, and a lot of things in entrepreneurship, especially for us, we kind of wear multiple hats, is all about planning ahead. And you're just dropping so many like gems right now that I'm like, this is why we see your growth, and this is why we see you, growing your conference that you have, and because you're planning, you're being very intentional with how you're showing up. Now, well, let's talk about like bad visibility, because I feel like we often don't talk about that. Have you had any experiences where being visible in your content or even in your journey as a coach has given you things that you're like, shit, like why did I say yes to that?
I feel sometimes, there was no rule book or blueprint to navigating these really crazy times that we are experiencing in our world. And I know that there are some times where we feel pressured to make a statement, or we feel pressured to like say something. And sometimes we do have to kind of just like be a little quiet and try to figure out like what's the best way to show up. And I think for me, like there have been times where I'm like, I get really nervous. I mean, we still get nervous days of like, am I saying the right thing? Am I, like if I'm going to speak up and make a stand and say it, I have to like say it with conviction. And I think when you're dealing with a lot of different audiences, there are going to be times where you might piss people off. And you, as the business owner, really have to come to terms with that. But it goes back to your values, right? Like, if this is what I stand for and this is my mission and my vision, then it's okay if I piss people off, because at the end of the day, I'm sticking by with what I said. And so, sometimes like in the conference, we do cuss a little, and like it's very, very authentic. And I know like when you're working with bigger sponsors, sometimes they might not like that. Sometimes it's like, and I remember that like this last kind of like conference, there was a little too much cussing, and it's one of those things where it's like, ooh, sorry, because it made people feel uncomfortable, right? And so it's like understanding like how to balance your authenticity as you continue to work with higher brands and like people that are not used to that.
Yeah, and I mean, I do it on the podcast, and I used to have a lot of mindset blocks. I'm like, I don't want to say that, but that's how I talk. Obviously, I don't cuss in front of my nenas, but every
Yeah.
once in a while I do like to drop the F bomb, because that's just how I'm passionate about what we're talking about. But I also try not to do it all the time, because that's not how I talk. So
Yeah, exactly.
now I want us to well, first of all, I want you to know that we created a 2025 Must Attend conferences, and we put your name there because we want more Latinas to attend your conference. So tell us when the conference is happening, and how can we support the growth of this specific conference that is all about helping Latinas and women of color just become more visible and step into their authenticity.
Yes, so Hustle and Socialize is the premier leadership conference for minority businesswomen. It is here in San Antonio, Texas. The seventh annual conference is happening June 6th and 7th, 2025, in downtown San Antonio at a hotel called Hotel Contessa. And this is, bigger than life now. It started off first as a very local event and has now grown into a national event where so many women of color, Latinas, come to connect with other industry experts and be visible and grow and scale their businesses. And so this event is truly a labor of love. We have a really great curriculum and framework that we work off of. And that is all about being visible in specific areas. So we have the money pillar, the marketing pillar, and the mindset pillar. Once you start recognizing like how to really grow in the way of being visible in those areas, you start seeing your business and your impact really grow. And so we focus a lot on that. The conference is sort of split up into two main areas. We have, the main stage stuff where we've got our keynotes and fireside chats and panels. And then in the afternoon, we have breakout sessions where industry experts will come and teach on a specific topic in accordance to the pillars. And tickets will be going on sale to the wait list first. So if you're on the wait list, you're going to get an exclusive early bird rate in January that is not going to be available to the public. So I'm sharing with everybody, it's so important to get on that wait list, because then the tickets general admission will launch in March of 2025. And really the best ways to support the event is, share this event with other women. We need more conferences like, Hustle and Socialize and every other conference too that is for us. We need more of that. And so liking our social media, sharing our website, and just telling your friends about Hustle and Socialize. And then, of course, invest in yourself, make that investment to put Hustle and Socialize, put San Antonio, Texas on your place to travel in the summer. It's the Riverwalk. It's gorgeous. It's a great time to come visit our beautiful city. And then, of course, sponsorships. The more we can grow in brand partnerships and partnering with other people who are investing in other Latino owned businesses is really the one way we're going to continue to grow as a community.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. I'm super excited for your conference as well. Like I just love watching how intentional you are being with the conference, the speakers that you bring. And I also want to say that sometimes when we see the price tag of a conference, there's a lot of like, my goodness, maybe I shouldn't do it, maybe I should wait. And attending live conference changed my life. And because I used to go to all conferences that were either white men or white women, but there was never a Latina conference that I felt so seen. And just being like in a room where we're speaking Spanish and dancing to all kinds of music, like that was such a big investment. And I highly recommend that you put Christina's conference on your must go for 2025, because we have to also leave the environment where we are. Sometimes we don't see that conference in our town. We're like, oh my gosh, no hay nada aquí. But when you go to a conference like this, then you can come back and be like, wow, I'm just going to make that like my annual conference where I'm going to go and grow and be with other Latinas. So I love that so much. Now, before I let you go, I want to ask you, what is your definition of wealth?
My definition of wealth is being able to really live unapologetically. And that is with freedom, with flexibility, with stability, understanding that I am the creator and the driver and the imaginative of like what wealth can look like, but also to give back to my community and to have things that are so important so that when I'm gone and now we have other generations, they are benefiting from that fruit of my labor. And so I really believe like that legacy building is 100% my why.
I love that so much. And mujeres, make sure that you follow Cristina. Use the link in the show notes to get a hold of her, get on the wait list, because you don't want to wait. You do not want to wait for this conference. And Cristina, I just want to say thank you for your time right now. It's such a gift. And also thank you for showing us that it's okay for us to be visible and that it's okay for us to create impact through our businesses and our community.
Awesome. Thank you so much.